In this podcast episode, host Jonathan Cohen engages with Thomas Campbell, a physicist and longtime consciousness researcher, about the fundamental nature of reality, consciousness, and how these insights impact healing, remote viewing, telepathy, artificial intelligence, and the afterlife. Campbell explains his journey from traditional physics into exploring altered states, out-of-body experiences, and paranormal phenomena, culminating in a comprehensive model that views reality as an information-based virtual system rendered by consciousness. The conversation bridges complex scientific ideas and practical applications, such as intention setting for healing and navigating consciousness in everyday life. Thomas Campbell introduces himself primarily as a physicist who became curious about consciousness after a paranormal experience in graduate school that enabled him to debug software mentally, an impossible feat by conventional standards. This experience propelled him to explore out-of-body experiences and related phenomena under the tutelage of Bob Monroe, the pioneer of controlled out-of-body experiments. Campbell describes extensive experiments using isolated acoustic and electromagnetic booths to prove that out-of-body experiences and remote viewing are objective phenomena occurring outside of the mind. A key event was him and a colleague experiencing the same out-of-body environment independently, confirming consciousness as an external rather than purely internal reality, challenging materialistic worldviews. Campbell elaborates on his central thesis that everything, including consciousness and physical reality, is fundamentally information-based. He draws parallels between consciousness processing data from the senses to an information system interpreting inputs, comparing this to how particle physicists model subatomic particles as information points rather than material objects. This framework helps resolve quantum physics paradoxes by depicting reality as a probability space where possibilities are drawn randomly from known probabilities, a mechanism akin to a raffle system. Quantum wave function collapse is thus a metaphor for this selection process, whereby consciousness renders one outcome from many probabilities, applying universally from subatomic particles to everyday macroscopic events. According to Campbell, what we perceive as the physical world is a virtual reality simulation generated and rendered by portions of consciousness acting as avatars. This simulation selectively renders details based on where the observer's attention is directed, similar to how video games only load visible elements to optimize resources. Individual human consciousnesses represent distinct units, individuated units of consciousness, interacting within a collective, multiplayer system. This model dictates that evolution occurs through lowering informational entropy, moving from disorder, fear-based behavior, toward order, love-based cooperation. Choices rooted in fear devolve consciousness and create chaos, whereas choices rooted in love advance growth and harmony. The conversation shifts to healing as a practical illustration of modifying the simulation's probability distribution. Campbell relates healing abilities to changing future probabilities. Intention acts as a force that skews the random draw toward favorable outcomes, such as disease remission. Healing is deemed one of the simplest paranormal phenomena to access because it hinges on altering uncertain probabilities. The placebo effect exemplifies this principle, where belief and expectation tangibly influence real-world physiology. He cautions that healing depends heavily on the practitioner's and patient's mindset, emotional state, and clarity of intent, requiring focused, consistent intention, often achieved through meditation or ritual. Negative collective beliefs within a family or community can pull probabilities toward worsening conditions. Campbell stresses the importance of ethical intentions when engaging in healing or influence over others' consciousness. He shares experiences where healing involved first determining whether the individual was ready or willing to be healed, highlighting that some illnesses may serve a necessary purpose for personal growth. An illustrative story recounts healing a baby with a fatal brain tumor, explaining that a soul swap or replacement consciousness willing to sustain the life was needed for healing to manifest realistically. This approach respects the autonomy and agreement of consciousness entities involved, avoiding manipulative or coercive interventions often cautioned against in such practices. A critical distinction Campbell makes is between the intuitive and intellectual modes of consciousness. Paranormal abilities like telepathy, remote viewing, and healing operate in the intuitive channel, which becomes inaccessible once the intellect dominates with analysis and skepticism. Intuition provides the immediate, uncensored perception or insight crucial for modifying probabilities effectively. Campbell advises that to strengthen intuitive abilities, one must quiet internal mental noise and remain open-minded, as intellectual doubt and criticism shut down access. People often unwittingly sabotage their own abilities by defaulting to intellectual skepticism, preventing authentic experiences and observable results. Campbell describes consciousness as an interconnected network where awareness and intentions can be turned on or off between individuals. One can consciously adjust the degree of sensitivity or energetic influence from others to protect themselves from negativity or amplify connections with specific groups or individuals. This modulation of connection is based entirely on intention and can be set to specific parameters, such as focusing on people with shared traits or circumstances. He illustrates how thinking about someone often triggers a reciprocal mental impression, which can lead to synchronous contacts, like receiving a call from an old friend shortly after thinking of them, suggesting meaningful interconnections rather than pure coincidence. Campbell expands the scope of consciousness beyond humans, affirming that all beings with awareness and choice possess consciousness, albeit with varying capacities. Animals like dogs and bumblebees display purposeful behavior and limited decision spaces, reflecting lesser but real consciousness. Decision space defines the number of choices available to a consciousness entity, depending on its processing capacity and sensory input. He foreshadows the potential consciousness of artificial intelligences, pondering if AI systems can develop awareness given sufficient capacity and intentionality, emphasizing that consciousness is awareness with choice, which is not limited to biological forms alone. When asked how often he sets intentions, Campbell shares that after decades of practice, he generally adopts a broad macro intention set, living with the purpose of reducing entropy and evolving consciousness, while allowing daily events to unfold naturally without micromanaged intentions. Although he can influence probabilities in small ways, constant direct intention setting can trap a person in predictable bubbles, reducing opportunities for learning and growth. Instead, responding skillfully and making focused, low-entropy choices in face of challenges forms the core of his life approach. Campbell posits that difficult experiences provide vital learning, while easy circumstances offer fewer opportunities for evolution. The hosts discuss parallels between ancient religious or folk healing practices and Campbell's descriptions of intention and consciousness work. Many rituals, though cloaked in symbolic or supernatural narratives, such as naming ceremonies to confuse spirits or symbolic transference of sin onto animals, serve to solidify group intention and focus mental energy for healing or protection. Such rituals have survived because they are effective in engaging focused intention, even if the underlying explanatory stories are culturally conditioned. This recognition bridges modern consciousness models with traditional spiritual practices and highlights the power of collective belief and focused intent. Campbell revisits how his model resolves quantum physics enigmas by situating consciousness as the root cause of wave function collapse, rejecting the idea that physical particles suddenly emerge from mathematics. Instead, quantum outcomes are probabilistic draws influenced by consciousness. This merging of subjective awareness and objective physics forms a theory of everything that unites and explains paradoxes across theology, psychology, metaphysics, and physics. He cites historical figures, including Einstein and early quantum pioneers, who recognized consciousness at the foundation of reality but lacked a framework to incorporate it scientifically. Campbell frames life as a large-scale multiplayer virtual reality game in which individuated units of consciousness interact. The aim is to evolve by lowering entropy through love, cooperation, and altruism, contrasting with fear-based behaviors that increase disorder. This evolutionary path requires conscious choices that affect not just oneself but others through rippling probabilities. The system's complexity makes cheating or gaming impossible, as interactions are highly dynamic and interconnected. Thus, the quality of choice, whether based in fear or love, is the ultimate determinant of spiritual evolution within this simulated reality. Toward the end of the podcast, hosts hint at the second part of the interview, where Campbell will discuss artificial intelligence's place within consciousness, experiences related to interacting with the afterlife, and reinterpretations of extraterrestrials as aspects or signs from the larger consciousness system. He also explores how human evolution may be restoring capacities to perceive beyond material reality, revisiting what disclosure truly means beyond government and physical phenomena. These upcoming discussions promise to deepen the understanding of consciousness's role across domains, from technology to metaphysics.